Today we're tackling, well, it's a challenging topic, but a really important one.
A very important one.
We're going to be looking at some tailored strategies for neurodiverse marriages.
Right, specifically that ASD male NT female dynamic. Our goal was to find ways to turn these big relationship deficits into problems you can actually analyze.
Get into solvable problems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the need for this is it's huge. The sources we looked at cite some pretty staggering research.
Staggering is the right word. Some reports put the divorce rate as high as 80%.
80%. And it so often boils down to this fundamental conflict.
Yeah.
You have the neurotypical partner communicating through emotion, seeking that connection.
And then the autistic partner defaults to logic, to finding a quick fix.
And that mismatch just leads to burnout. But here's the key, the big reframing that all our sources insist on.
Okay.
If you are the ASD partner, you have to stop seeing these difficulties with empathy, with social cues, as some kind of moral failure.
Or like you're being malicious.
Right. Instead, view them as remediable skill deficits. They're tied to your neurology, which means they can be addressed with logic and, with training.
That reframing is everything. It makes it solvable.
It does. And if you look at the brain wiring, it just makes sense. NT women, on average, have more activity in the deep limbic system. That's where emotion and memory get tied together.
Meanwhile, a lot of ASD partners are very left hemisphere dominant, which drives that immediate task-oriented fix-it response.
So he's trying to solve the problem with logic.
Well, she just wants the feeling to be seen, to be acknowledged. So the core directive for the ASD partner has to be focus on her emotional state.
Yes. The goal is to change her feelings, not her thoughts. Don't leap to the fix.
And this isn't just, wishful thinking. There's a scientific guarantee here.
There is. It's called neuroplasticity. This is the promise. With consistent, deliberate practice of these skills, emotional and social intelligence, you literally change your brain's function.
So that old idea that these skills just can't be learned.
It's just wrong. It's completely outdated.
Okay, so that's the foundation. Behaviorally, how do we move from those high conflict states, like the passivity of a shutdown?
Or the aggressiveness of a meltdown.
Right. How do we get to assertiveness?
Yeah.
To actual participation? Where do we start?
You have to start internally. The first pillar is cognitive restructuring.
Which sounds very appealing to an analytical mind.
It is. You basically treat your own negative thoughts like bad data.
Yeah.
You have to identify and then eliminate what we call cognitive distortions, or CDs.
Things like mind reading, where you just assume your partner has negative intentions.
Exactly. Or personalization, where you take the blame for something that's totally outside of your control.
So you treat the bad data with good logic. The sources laid out a simple process, the 3 C's.
Capture, challenge, change. First, you capture the negative thought as it happens. Then you challenge it, like a lawyer. What's the actual evidence for this?
And then finally you change it. You replace it with a thought that's realistic, logical, and this is key, believable to you.
Once that internal logic is cleaner, you can move to the second pillar, structured communication.
How does that work in, say, a normal, non-conflict conversation?
There's the APV model: active listening, paraphrase, and validation.
And validation is the tricky one. It means you acknowledge that her feelings are legitimate.
Even if you think the facts of the situation are objectively wrong, you're validating the emotion, not the argument.
But what about when things get heated? Say your partner is data dumping, just overwhelming you with problems. It's hard to use a model then.
That's where assertive scripts come in. You need a plan A. Instead of shutting down, you set a respectful boundary. Something like, it would be helpful for me if we just dealt with one problem at a time.
And if plan A doesn't work?
Plan B, a calm, respectful timeout. You state that you need to step away, but you promise to come back to it later. You initiate the return.
So consistency is obviously key, but there are also those real-world logistical issues like executive function deficits.
Right, and for that, comprehensive task lists are often, they're useless.
So what's the alternative?
External scaffolding. Don't rely on your memory. Use visual cues, alarms on your phone, structured apps. It turns it from a moral failing into a simple mechanical problem to be solved.
So with all this continuous effort, one thing is bound to build up: resentment. Wow. Replaying past anger again and again.
And this might be the most profound takeaway from all the sources. They offer a really challenging therapeutic view on this.
Which is?
Forgiveness. Forgiveness is fundamentally an act of self-care.
Not something for the other person.
Not primarily. It's a gift you give yourself to release your own personal burden of anger. It frees you from that mental prison, and you do it regardless of whether your partner ever apologizes.
So you're shifting the focus. Forgiveness isn't something you owe someone else. It's something you owe yourself.
If you're the neurotypical wife seeking, well, real actionable support in your marriage where your partner is autistic, we're moving past the usual advice, getting into the specialized stuff.
Exactly. Our mission here is to help you build, or maybe rebuild, a marital system that's genuinely resilient, that accommodates neurological difference. And the absolute starting point, it's adopting a neurodiversity affirming perspective. That means seeing autism, ASD, not as something wrong, not a deficit, but just a natural variation in how brains work. So the goal isn't trying to normalize your partner. It's finding what the sources call motivated peace with the differences. Appreciating strengths, yes, but also understanding those distinct processing needs.
Okay, let's get into the friction point, the thing that often leads to burnout for the NT partner. Why does that happen?
Yeah. Well, it often comes down to what we call the causal link. It's how behavior gets interpreted. See, NT partners are generally wired to pick up on subtle, quick emotional cues, nonverbal stuff. So when the ASD partner processes information more literally or maybe takes longer to respond, the NT wife's instinct is often to assign negative intent.
So you automatically think he's doing this to me. Like he's ignoring me or he just doesn't care.
Precisely. When the reality is very often a neurological difference, like a processing delay. It's not about intent, it's about wiring.
That sounds hard. I mean, overriding a deeply ingrained instinct like that, how do you actually do that?
That's where cognitive restructuring is key. It's probably the most valuable tool, really. It means you consciously, actively override that first interpretation. So instead of thinking he's stonewalling, you learn to reframe it internally. Okay, processing delay happening, need to cut to 30 seconds, or maybe let's revisit this in writing later. Shifting from feeling rejected to recognizing difference, that's fundamental.
And it's not just about emotional signals, is it? The environment plays a big role too.
Oh, absolutely. The sensory context is huge and often overlooked. A lot of stress can be driven by just differences in sensory processing, maybe overstimulation from noise, bright lights, even strong smells. So being proactive about adapting the environment, reducing those sensory triggers, that's a major way to lower stress for your partner, prevent autistic burnout, and that helps reduce your stress too.
Okay, so if intent versus difference is the core issue, then standard communication methods, they probably don't work so well. The sources mention something called the double empathy problem. What's that about for a listener?
Yeah, the double empathy problem basically means that both partners struggle to intuitively understand the other's way of experiencing the world and communicating. It goes both ways. NTs often rely on fast, nonverbal cues, subtext, nuance, while ASD partners tend to process verbal information more literally, often needing more time. It creates this mutual misunderstanding.
So bridging that gap requires more structure.
Definitely. The NT wife needs to lean into what we might call the 4 C's. Communication needs to be clear, concise, concrete, and consistent.
Meaning, ditch the vague hints, the sarcasm, the complicated metaphors.
Exactly. Keep it direct. But, like you said, that doesn't solve everything, especially for really emotional or complex topics.
Right. How do you handle those?
Structure is your friend. For those tough conversations, seriously consider using written documentation. It gives your ASD partner the time and space they need to process without the pressure of an immediate verbal back and forth. And also implement scheduled check-ins, like a dedicated weekly meeting. It provides predictability for difficult talks, helps contain the emotional load to a specific time.
Okay, let's talk about fairness, about equity. One big risk highlighted is this emotional labor asymmetry, sometimes called slow self-erasure, where the NT wife ends up carrying way more of the mental load, the planning, the love as logistics work.
It's a really common and significant pain point. The solution involves a shift. The NT wife needs to move from being the default manager of everything to being the co-architect of shared systems.
Co-architect. How's it different from just like delegating tasks?
Good question. Delegation often fails because the NT partner still holds the mental responsibility, remembering the task exists, checking if it got done, managing the overall system. Co-architecture means the ASD husband has to take genuine ownership of his parts, filling in his sections of the shared visual schedule, maintaining his designated tasks within the system you build together. If you're still the one maintaining the system itself, the imbalance remains. The goal is shared effort, made possible by clear, externalized structures.
Got it. That's a crucial distinction. And doing all this translation, system building, managing your own reactions, it takes energy. Which brings us to self-care.
Yes, the self-care mandate. It's not optional, it's essential. As the NT wife, you have to see your own recovery and well-being as non-negotiable. You need to actively ration your resources because it can feel like you're running, well, two nervous systems at once, and that leads straight to depletion if you don't refuel.
And sometimes this complexity just requires outside help, doesn't it? Specialized help.
It often does, and it's really important to prioritize finding a certified neurodiverse couples therapist, an NDCT. That specialization matters because they understand the neurological lens. They act as a kind of good faith translator, explaining differences without judgment, moving beyond standard NT relationship models. It really changes the game for problem solving.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the sources note that intimacy can really improve when couples do things like a sensory inventory, figuring out what feels good or bad sensorily, and setting up clear pause signals during closeness. Structure supporting connection again.
Absolutely. Look, beyond the logistics, connection often comes down to translation. You need to remember and actively look for the ways your ASD partner does express love. It might not be typical romance. It could be acts of service, deep loyalty, sharing incredibly detailed info about a special interest. Part of your work as the NT wife is learning to translate those actions, those gestures, into felt love, recognizing them for the expressions of care they often are. Which this raises an important question. What core value, or maybe even just a recurring task, are you willing to externalize and document this week? Get it out of your head and into a shared system to protect your own emotional capacity.
Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, it'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you.